Welcome, everybody. It's August 6, 2021. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz. It's This Week in XR. And of course, we're still talking about
the metaverse.
Metaverse.
And a little bit of a celebration. Didn't you mention this might be our 50th episode,
Yeah.
Charlie?
I mean, we've been doing this shit for a year, Ted.
Yeah. It's we've held it together for a year, which is
and there's such big money in podcasting
exactly
us. We do have about 500 listeners, so thank you guys on Spotify and iTunes, and many people just listen to us on YouTube. I hope they're not looking at us because the visual part of this show is not great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just us in our rooms, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Wherever we might be in the world that week. But
so if you want to know what we look at like on Zoom 36 hours a week,
this is what you look at YouTube. I do have to tell you, it has been an interesting year. Obviously, the pandemic year, and now going into 2 years. But an interesting year spending time with you week over week, dancing into these different areas, bringing these really interesting guests in from all around the planet, doing interesting, very forward-thinking things. And I think both of us have learned a lot by the experience. And I think our listeners seem to be, they respond back. So it's actually really fun to listen to you guys learn every week about things and talk about.
I mean, more and more people are bringing it up to me, and I'm always a little bit surprised because this seems like a private thing that we're doing.
A little bit, but it's opening. The kimono is opening here every week.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And what a conversation last week with Roni Abovitz about Metaverse. I mean, that guy continues to amaze me by thinking thoughts no one else does.
Mm-hmm. And he and I talk a lot. Like we're buddies, and we chat about this, and lived through his whole arc with Magic Leap and all this stuff, and all of these things that we take this very long view on how we all work together to prove something out that is futuristic. And I thought last week's episode was a really good example of that. He's a very interesting person to spend time with.
So I don't want to keep repeating our pattern with the metaverse, but we do have a guest this morning who is in fact building a metaverse on a shoestring compared to these giants like Facebook. But the interesting thing is on his shoestring, he has actually built this company. It's called Engage. It's David Whelan, the co-founder and CEO. And so we'll be talking metaverses with him today as well. But I hope that we can move on from metaverses. There's a bunch of other topics that I wanted to bring up, including our friends at Leia. You remember the light field display. They're a spinoff from HP, and they have introduced their own branded holographic light field Android pad called the Loom, which is $650, and it is quite amazing, Ted, to finally have holograms, 3D without glasses, sitting here on this little tablet. There's an image that seems to float above the tablet, and it seems to have infinite depth inside. So I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to market this because you can't show it.
Yeah, that technology has gone through many fits and starts, right? And it has shown up in some automotive displays. I know that Honda was actually using it. It showed up in a company that I was obviously deeply involved in for a long time on the Red camera side, when they decided to do a three-dimensional phone.
Right, the hydrogen.
Yeah, that was fairly short-lived, but it certainly proved out the point that there would be some interest in this, and they keep at it. And now they're sort of building a tablet like a Samsung tablet or an iPad that has that same technology, that has this kind of what we call 4D view thing, where you don't have to wear glasses and things kind of create this floating kind of 3 or 4 inches off the screen experience. It's an interesting one. There's another company that I'm pretty interested
in. Do you think we'll ever have like a TV that does that?
Not only do I think we'll have a TV, that's what I was going to mention. There's a company, I believe they're somewhere out of Europe, maybe.
Oh, Domenico.
Domenico, exactly. That now, because we can get 8K displays.
Right, but that's like a $20,000 thing.
Yeah, but extrapolate year over year, just like a 4K TV was a $20,000 thing. Now you can buy it at Costco for $1,000 or $2,000. At some point, 8K displays will be as cost effective as 4K displays. And one of the things you can do when you actually interpolate 2 4K images is you can get a fairly high resolution non-glasses stereoscopic experience. So I've actually seen it and tested it a few different times, and you can manipulate and move objects. It's interesting for commerce. It might be a consumer technology someday. So between what Leia is doing and what Domenico are doing and a few other companies, it's an interesting space to watch.
I thought about something that happened in 1990 with Michael Eisner and Jeff Katzenberg. We wanted to talk about making 3D animated movies. So we, some of them have been 3D-ized through their many, many releases and re-releases throughout. And in the 50s, of course, they wanted to compete with television by providing more and more spectacular live movie experiences. So we watched, I think it was Sleeping Beauty in 3D. And we got about halfway through the movie, and Eisner took off the glasses and he goes, this sucks. It's really uncomfortable. It doesn't really work. How would we ever, release something like this and ask kids to wear these glasses?
Yeah. But then flash forward to
So he says, so we've got to figure out how to do 3D without glasses. And there were technology guys from WED and from animation, and they just stood there.
Right. And like, at that time, there was no.
And they said, well, the technology doesn't exist.
Right. So now
and he said, well, we need to have this discussion again when the technology exists. Right. So it's a little late for Michael Eisner to have that discussion, but I would imagine there are people at Disney having that discussion.
Well, yeah. So now we know that, there are 4K projectors that exist in the world. And if you map 2, 4, or 8 projectors together, right, you can get a high enough resolution image that you can create some sort of stereoscopic image without glasses. It is still more fantasy than reality, right? I mean, theme park rides, when they go 3D, you still wear glasses. Large mainstream movies, and obviously Avatar proved that there would be a commercial desire when it's really well crafted to live inside a 3-dimensional world in a movie theater. But I would keep a close eye on that, Domenico, and their kind of technology touch points, because it is very interesting for point of purchase, commerce things, and maybe there'll be a home entertainment use case somewhere down the road.
Yeah, I've got a soft spot for this technology. I wrote about Domenico when we were back in the Reel in 2019.
Right.
And, I got to meet with them at CES. So, by the way, CES 2022.
Yeah, it's still on. I guess we'll see.
I guess we're gonna all be masked up, which is unfortunate, but
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm still now debating NAB, in October, because it's a maybe. And from a company standpoint, there's a lot of discussions on large group gatherings like this. Does it make sense? What's the upside? What's the downside? I think a lot of companies and people are going through their own little personal journeys on this, which I am as well.
So, last thing I want to talk about before we get to David.
Yeah.
There's a company called Brain Technologies.
Yeah.
They just raised $50 million from people like Scott Cook and Lorene Powell Jobs. And 50 million bucks is still real money. And it's for a technology that I don't even understand how it exists. So maybe you can help us out here. People are going to use their brain to control apps.
Yeah, and it's a natural language processing type thing that they're sort of building in these, mnemonic devices, something that it's kind of fantastic that companies can raise this amount of capital to work on these interesting achievables that have become, in its earlier stages of things, voice recognition, voice awareness, what happened with Siri and all these things started out.
I like what you did there, connecting it back to Leia.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, let's get to David. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm a big admirer of the company, and they've had some great events recently and some big plans.
Yeah, you and I have spent time in space with them and in Mars with them, and places that are intriguing and unusual, and I think he'll be an interesting one to talk to.
Terrific. Welcome, David. Our guest this morning is David Whelan, the co-founder and CEO of VR Education Holdings PLC, trading on the Irish Exchange as VRE.L. David and his wife Sandra started this company about 4 years ago with Apollo 11 VR experience and segued into creating the super successful Engage social VR platform, which I use as a college professor. Secondary education is a popular application along with corporate training and conferences. You just raised $10 million to build Engage into a LinkedIn type of business metaverse. I think that's super interesting, of course, on the heels of Epic Games raising $1 billion for a social VR universe that we're not sure they've even created yet, or maybe it'll be built off of Fortnite. But here you are, and you're doing it, on a shoestring, right? VR Education Holdings is the micro cap of micro capiest.
So yeah, I think we definitely do things quite a bit differently. So with those other metaverses and even what Facebook are doing, they're really appealing to 7 to 17-year-olds that they will get a very small return, maybe $5 or $10 a year out of each user. Whereas we have a business platform, which, as you said, educators are using, a lot of corporates are using today. So we build a business a little bit differently, where when we show some real traction, then we'll go and we'll raise capital to make sure that we can expand on that growth. Whereas I think typically in America, with a lot of startups, they'll raise $50, $100 million. Hopefully they can get an idea together and then become big enough then where they've become self-sustaining. So it is a little bit different. With the metaverse that we're developing, it is aimed at young professionals, business users and the general public, but of an older age group, maybe 17 and above, where we're getting $300 a year per user, typically on the enterprise side of things. And we hope when the Engage Oasis is finally released, that with this older age group, that they will actually spend more and subscribe to the businesses and institutions on the platform, which will build the metaverse themselves. So as an example, say an organization will come to us, they will buy a space on this Engage Oasis, their own meta world, and they can control what happens in it. They will brand the location, they can provide services through their own location, and people can subscribe to that location. So it is quite a bit different to what Rec Room and Allspace and Facebook are doing.
Yeah, David and I know each other pretty well, and I've done some experimentation on the platform, as well as some of the teams that I'm working with has done some experimentation on the platform. We are enthused about it. We've had lots of discussions and sort of collab discussions. And I think the most interesting point that you make is about sort of scaling it out to slightly different age ranges and different use groups across the professional sectors, and different sort of points of view around this use case of the VR versions of the metaverse. Just opening that kimono a little bit in terms of finding other demographics seems to be what you're already successful at. And now you're starting to get a real push as the kind of, call it, mainstream entertainment and social worlds have now embraced this terminology, and even gone as so bold as to say we're actually turning our companies into metaverse companies, right? You've kind of already been there at the inception of that, and have already built a pretty robust tool that a lot of companies are already dancing around in. And I think that's good on you. You're on the right track, and obviously investment capital has realized that and have provided you with a little more runway to keep building it.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of obviously we're trying to get to profitability as quick as possible as well. I think we definitely have a good pathway now, and that's why the investors have backed us even more, and we hope to have more news coming quite soon. But it's not build something and hope they will come. And we've been working with institutions and blue chip companies over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're just providing what they're asking us to provide. So we have about, I'd say, 95% of what goes on in Engage is never seen to the public.
Right.
Quite typically, an organization will come to us, they'll buy maybe 1,000 user accounts, they'll use it internally for events, meetings, and training, and we can never talk about that type of stuff, and you only see a tiny fraction of what actually happens within the platform. And I know there's other platforms as well that actually struggle in similar ways. I know Spatial as well, they do a lot of stuff that's really kept private. Security is a massive thing as well. I know Facebook are building a metaverse, but quite often, especially in Europe, a lot of companies would have a hard time actually putting training material on a platform where they think maybe the data might be shared freely. So that's a huge concern over on this side of the pond, which is something that maybe a lot of American companies wouldn't see day to day.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point that, business communication in, like, let's call it the traditional metaverse, the one that we're in right now on flat screens, is largely, peer-to-peer, private or semi-private communication or small group communication. That's effectively how the world goes round, right? The public touch points of that, where like Charlie and I have some degree of public, where we are obviously out in the press every week doing stuff, and Charlie spends time on social media and those types of things. And a lot of you spend time on social media, but the business at large of turning what we used to do in the real world into this mirrored world of we're using the public internet and technology to do it is largely a privatized business. And that's a tap point for you. So I think that's a good thing for, to think about, to touch on, because most of, video chat communication isn't in the public sphere. It's people talking about their work that they're doing, or, small social groups socializing with friends and stuff.
Yeah, and we're trying to build a sustainable business as well. So with you'll see with a lot of businesses, and everybody, nearly every startup you hear about now is, oh, we're building a metaverse and we're doing this and we're doing X, Y, and Z. But they're really reliant on the backers or their investees. And if they fall foul of the investees and they don't get backing, those metaverses will disappear. Whereas we're building a sustainable ecosystem where it's the clients themselves who use it will be generating real revenue, for their users, or real value, for their employees and their businesses in general. And it's kind of really think of our metaverse as a mixture between LinkedIn, Reddit, and what you would typically associate with a metaverse. When people read, Ready Player One or some of those other earlier books. So it's certainly going to be an interesting time, and we have a lot to share in the next six to 8 months.
David, when will we see the upgrade happen on Engage, this sort of business metaverse, which I guess will be added to the platform, which will continue to provide, a place for education and training?
Yeah, so you're going to see upgrades over the next 6 months of different features. So when you log into Engage, you'll still have Engage as a service if you want that privately, and your organization can use it like they use Microsoft Teams or Zoom. And then early next year, we think around the end of Q1, maybe start of Q2 next year, the first half of next year, definitely, you will actually see the birth of the Engage Oasis. And there'll be a major event that will happen. You'll be freely be able to explore the businesses that have signed up to use the metaverse, and you'll be able to subscribe to those business services if you want to do so. So I can imagine, and we're already actually seeing this with some of our partners, there'll be full-time jobs available inside Engage Oasis, because a lot of these big organizations, they don't have spatial experts. They're really only dipping their toe in the VR space. Right. They're going to want to hire experts to actually moderate their locations, to make sure everybody has a good time and everybody is in there, and and it's safe to use the platform. Like, I think quite often when people talk about the metaverse, and it's like very much the Wild West, and there's a lot of great stuff that happens in these metaverses, but then there's also a lot of illicit activities that can happen as well that can really drag these metaverses down. And that's why I think businesses have really shied away, and professional organizations have shied away from this space. But that's something that we're hoping to rectify.
It strikes me that the notion of a metaverse, and just to digress or pivot to something that is much bigger picture, it's sort of like these, Russian dolls, where there's one inside of another, right? Because Engage is part of a bigger metaverse. When we talk about the Facebook metaverse, it is one aspect of the Oculus metaverse, or the Steam metaverse, if you will, right? So it's sort of a metaverse within a metaverse within a metaverse. So now at some point there will be an open HTML-like platform that will break down those barriers. That's what I think of as the metaverse. Once those barriers are gone, of course, now I have a transportable avatar, I have a backpack with, services and technology in it that I take with me, so that I have the same personal interface on Engage that I have when I'm in Population One, or honestly VR Chat, or any of the social platforms. And I might be moving between, VR Chat related metaverse destinations and Engage-based destinations, in the same way I flip between Facebook and LinkedIn on my personal computer.
Yeah, I think it'll be slightly different. So I have a slightly different take on it. So when you jump between, say, VR chat and Allspace and whatever Facebook are building, yes, I believe that you probably bring your same presence from different locations and it'll be dressed up and you can be whoever you want to be. I think the business version of the metaverse, what we're building, will be slightly different. So when you're on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile is very professional, and it's an outward representation of you for the business world. But then when you go on to Snapchat or Facebook, it's completely different. It's your personal space with your friends and family are in, and you're a bit freer there, and you put your personal thoughts there. I think this is going to work pretty similar, where I think people inside Engage will have their business and professional persona because they want to do business with each other and trade with each other. And then when they go to Allspace, they can be, or VR chat, they can be a furry, or they can be, some character from some digital recreation. So I do think it's going to be tailored. And I also think that the people using the Engage metaverse with their own meta worlds will want to have certain types of dress code. So if you go into, say, a blue chip company organization metaverse, they're not going to want to have people walking around in bikinis. They're going to want to have, they're going to want to have people walking around.
Right. So you're not going to have a business meeting with a giant lizard, a shoe, an anime girl, and a Marine.
Exactly. And that's what we see, typically. I remember I was at a meeting before in one of the other platforms, and I was talking to the A-Team truck. It was somebody, avatar was a truck. And then I was talking to an anime girl as well, and I just couldn't concentrate. I was laughing my head off, and it was a fantastic experience, whereas I think when the professionals are trying to do business and spark up ideas, I do think they'll want to see your real face and a full body avatar, not like a ghostly kind of image, and they definitely want legs as well.
Okay, so yes, a more realistic, fully embodied avatar, even though it's still sort of like a character from a graphic novel. At least it, has legs and it can do gestures more accurately. And one thing Facebook has been working on with their avatars, they showed a demo of it a few months ago. They're trying to create some semblance of eye contact.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. That's really what we're missing in these embodied platforms, is that at some point you feel kind of like it's a video game, because you can't get through that barrier of not making eye contact.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with David's perspective on this, because I've actually been thinking about this a lot, where I use this perspective of the current metaverse that we're all using on multiple platforms, multiple sites. We may have a common email address or a couple of email addresses that we use to sign in and out of them, but the persona that you have inside the various tools that you may use, your gaming platforms, your Xbox, your PlayStation, your LinkedIn, your Zoom, your, et cetera, your Twitter, your Facebook. Well, they may have a common thread to communicate back to you and find something to let you know. Your persona on each of those platforms tends to be represented differently, right? Yep. And I don't think that will change. What we're really changing is the visual tool set, the advancement of the visual tool set, to be able to feel like it's more real, to feel like it happens in a spatial universe. So my question to you, David, this is a curiosity, is I anticipate and know a little bit, because I've talked and spent time with your dev team, that your dev team is in a regular cadence of wearing VR headsets and maybe now some MR devices on a daily basis because it's their work. But your clientele, how are you finding that your clientele, what is the cadence of them putting a device like this on their face versus a traditional compute device? Like, I'm just curious how you see that business going. Is it really, really early? Are they just doing it for special events and do they have to be sort of prompted into VR? Or are they kind of like knowing that there's an advanced version of the visual set where they can be inside a spatial universe and they're opting to that? That's a curiosity for me.
Yeah, see that our clients really grow into it. So in my own organization, we hold all our daily stand-ups inside virtual reality. So they all have their headsets and we'll do our Kanban boards and our whiteboard sessions. And they're pretty used to it. But the way that our clients start off on the platform typically is no client will come to you and say, we want 3,000 user accounts because we're holding all our meetings in VR from now on. But they do come to us and say, we want to hold this event. We have a budget, could be 150, 200 grand, whatever it is. And our CEO is going to talk and our CTO is going to talk and we're going to host this event. So we will help them host that initial first step as an event. And we get to talk to all the C-level executives, which is fantastic. And then we're actually upselling those clients on, okay, you can actually use this for meetings and daily stand-ups. And quite quickly, what happens within a 3 or 6 month period is that you will see that they actually set up their remote teams, because everybody's working remote now. And once a week, they'll jump into VR and have like a longer stand-up, where they discuss what's happened during the week, and they will discuss ideas. And then quite often after that, maybe 3 or 4 months later, you'll see that it's really after spreading within the organization, and they're using it more, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. They won't use it all the time. So communication with, maybe if you're having a meeting with 5 or 6 people, they'll just use video. If you have a meeting with more than 5 people, they'll actually start using VR because of the spatial nature of it, spatial audio, and they find that they don't get jaded as quickly. You can wear the headset for an hour, it's fine. Whereas if you're on Zoom call after Zoom call all day for maybe 5 or 6 hours a day, you get very jaded very quickly. It doesn't really happen typically in a spatial meeting.
That's what I anticipated. So it sounds like you're starting to see that cadence change, right? Where they would typically sign in on a traditional screen. Now you're seeing a little uptick on them signing into virtual screens, but the events get them in. The events start their brain and their comfort zone. And then they're like, hey, why don't we do this in VR? And then before you know it, they're doing a couple of meetings a week in VR as opposed to on a traditional computer screen. Interesting.
Yeah, and even with the meetings, they don't hold them in typical meeting rooms anymore. So at the beginning, we were building digital representations of their real offices, and now they just don't do that. They'll hold their meeting on the surface of Mars or under the water, or they'll ask us to build something really strange. Quite often with the educational institutions, it's the medical trainers that will come to us first, because they have budgets, and they hold their meetings inside like a person's head or in someone's spleen and stuff like that. Like, so we like it when they get like really crazy far out ideas.
Yeah, they're gamifying it, right? Which is pretty
exactly, gamifying it as well. And I think with Engage as well, which is very useful, is we are the only virtual reality social platform available inside China. The whole service is running inside China, and our partners HTC actually are really starting to push out the boat there with the release of the Focus 3, and we're going to make this metaverse interconnect as well. So as much as the Americans like virtual reality and Europeans like the Asians really go streets ahead with the adoption of technology, especially in places like Korea, China, Japan.
Well, David, we need to wrap up our chat this morning. Thank you again for joining us. I guess the last thing I want to ask you is how the LinkedIn of VR is going to work for your typical user, because I know you talked about companies setting up shop there, but those companies need customers, they need visitors. The whole reason to have a LinkedIn is you want people on the outside to look in at you.
Yeah.
So what's the VR equivalent? How does that work? That freemium individual level work?
Yeah, so there is a free user account on Engage, where if you sign up when the Oasis is open, you can freely explore all the public areas that these organizations have set up. So you might have an organization like TEDS, as an example, set up something for a movie. And you can walk through the set of that movie, and then maybe you want to subscribe to learn how to make movies, as an example, and you could subscribe to a service, and that's between you and the organization as part of the metaverse. So there'll be lots of stuff to do. There'll be events to attend, free events as well, and music events as well, kind of the events that you would typically recognize. But the subscription services is going to be a real game changer for us. We're learning from professionals on different services. And really, the way I see it is, imagine a world, and I'm just going to use these 2 companies as an example. I'm not saying that they'll be on it, but imagine the metaverse Facebook world right next to the metaverse Twitter world. And then the employees of both of those organizations can actually freely talk and communicate with each other in the free lobby areas and generate new business ideas, the same as people do on LinkedIn. And hopefully that will generate increased value for the organizations that they're working for.
David Whelan of VR Education Holdings, operators of the Engage social VR platform for professionals. Thank you for joining us this morning. This has been another great conversation about the metaverse. We just can't get away from it today, Ted.
Yeah, it is the, discussion du jour, right? It's the world that we've lived in and are going to live in the future. So that makes a lot of sense, Charlie, that we're talking a lot about it. Really good talk, David. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Charlie.
Have a great weekend, everybody.